Hi there. Today I'm going to show you 5 seemingly normal photos, but each one hides a disturbing story you won't believe. First, the first photograph relates to Richard Ramirez, the notorious serial killer known by his nickname Night Stalker. This story takes place in Los Angeles, United States, in 1985. On July 5, 1985, 16-year-old Whitney Bennett returned home after hanging out with friends. That evening, she slept in her own room. The next morning, her parents heard groaning sounds from Whitney's room and immediately opened the door. They witnessed a horrifying scene. Whitney lay unconscious on her bed, covered in wounds, with blood splattered all over the walls. This is the crime scene photograph that was taken. Later, police quickly arrived on the scene. During their investigation, they discovered shoe prints on the floor. This immediately brought to mind a previous case in the city of Whittier. An elderly couple had been murdered, with the wife's eyes gouged out. The crime scene also showed matching shoe prints. Police concluded that the perpetrator of both cases was the same person. Shortly after, in Mission Viejo, a young boy happened to see a suspicious man lurking around outside his house. When this person left, the father and son only managed to catch sight of a car speeding away very quickly. The description matched the stranger that police were hunting for. During this period, a series of crimes continued to occur. The perpetrator would typically break into homes at midnight, murder the victims, then steal their property. The press and police called him the Night Stalker. One of the most shocking cases occurred at a young couple's home. The husband was shot dead on the spot, while the wife was tied up and threatened. He forced her to reveal where the money was hidden, then spared her life but made her tell police that the Night Stalker was here. Based on her testimony, police sketched a composite of the suspect and broadcast it on television. Shortly after, a group of citizens recognized him on the street. Ramirez tried to flee but was chased down, beaten, and handed over to police. He was identified as Richard Ramirez, 25 years old. Further investigation revealed that Ramirez grew up in an environment filled with violence. His cousin had been a war veteran who regularly showed young Ramirez graphic photos from the battlefield. The climax came when this cousin shot and killed his own wife right in front of Ramirez. This incident, combined with Ramirez's drug addiction and vagrant lifestyle, caused him to become obsessed with violence and Satan. In fact, in many of his crimes, he forced victims to swear to Satan before revealing where they hid their money. Returning to the attack on Whitney Bennett, that night she had forgotten to close her window, creating an opportunity for Ramirez to sneak in. He repeatedly struck her with an iron bar, causing blood to splatter throughout the room. Then he used a charging cord to strangle her. But at that moment, the electrical cord sparked from the outlet. Ramirez was startled, thinking this was a sign of God's intervention, so he fled. Thanks to this, Whitney was fortunate to survive, becoming one of the few living victims. Finally, Richard Ramirez was tried and sentenced to death. He was confirmed to have murdered many people randomly, without regard to age or gender. Second, the next photograph is tied to one of America's most chilling urban legends, Charlie No Face. At first glance, many assume this is about a ghost haunting dark roads, but the truth stems from a real person with a deeply tragic life. Raymond Theodore Robinson, born in 1910, grew up in an ordinary family in rural Pennsylvania. He was a gentle boy who loved exploring and had a curious nature. But in 1919, when he was just 9 years old, his life took a horrifying turn. On a summer afternoon, Raymond and some friends were playing near a railroad bridge. Above the bridge ran high-voltage power lines that everyone had been warned never to touch. But kids will be kids, curious and impulsive. Raymond decided to climb up to see if he could touch that wire without anything happening. The moment his small hand made contact with the wire, a terrible 22,000-volt current surged through his body. The boy collapsed, writhing in agony. Raymond's friends panicked and ran away, thinking he was dead. But Raymond survived, though he was no longer himself. The accident completely disfigured his face. He lost his nose. Both eyes were blinded, and his mouth and parts of his skin were severely burned. From that point on, Raymond could never live like a normal person again. He chose a life of isolation, staying inside for decades, only venturing out after dark. Each night, he would walk for miles along the dark road near his home, both for exercise and to enjoy the little bit of freedom he had. Local residents gradually spread word about the man without a face wandering at night, and from this, the name Charlie No Face was born. What few people knew was that Raymond actually had an incredibly gentle and polite personality. Despite carrying physical pain for his entire life, he maintained patience and resilience. Some people even recalled that he would readily stop to chat with curious young people, even allowing them to take pictures if they asked politely. However, not everyone was kind to Raymond. Many teenagers would drive out just to frighten or mock him. Sometimes people would throw bottles or shout, treating him like late-night entertainment. Raymond endured it all in silence, rarely fighting back. Raymond Robinson passed away in 1985 at age 74 after a long life spent in darkness. But instead of being remembered as a courageous man who fought against fate, he was transformed into a supernatural urban legend, Charlie No Face, Green Man, a symbol of fear for many generations. Third, this photograph relates to the tragic events at Ruby Ridge, Idaho, United States, in 1992. The man at the center is Randy Weaver, a former soldier. After leaving the military, he married Vicky, and together they had 4 children. Convinced that American society was growing corrupt and that the end was near, the family withdrew into isolation, building a wooden cabin at Ruby Ridge to await what they called the final moment. There, Weaver amassed a stockpile of weapons and formed a close bond with a like-minded drifter named Kevin Harris. Previously, Weaver had attended a meeting of the far-right organization Aryan Nations. There, he met a man named Gus, who was actually an undercover ATF agent. Weaver had sold guns to Gus, and this conversation was recorded. Authorities used this recording to pressure Weaver into becoming an informant, but Weaver refused to cooperate and criticized the government. Later, he was summoned to court. However, on the court date, Weaver did not appear, leading to an arrest warrant being issued. In August 1992, federal forces including the FBI and U.S. Marshals approached Weaver's home. They wore camouflage and carried weapons. When Weaver discovered armed strangers around the house, he, along with his son Sammy and his friend Harris, immediately took up guns and barricaded themselves. A gunfight broke out, killing Weaver's 14-year-old son and also resulting in the death of a federal officer. The situation then escalated. An FBI sniper was deployed on a hill. While observing, he fired a shot that hit Vicky Weaver, Randy's wife, as she was holding her young daughter. Vicky's death caused shock because she was not carrying any weapon. This shooting seriously violated FBI rules on the use of force and became a point of controversy for many years. Faced with pressure and casualties, the FBI had to send in a negotiator. After many tense days, Randy Weaver finally agreed to surrender. This famous photograph captures the moment he carried his young daughter out of the wooden house after surrendering, marking the end of the bloody 11-day siege. This left serious consequences for the FBI, as Vicky Weaver's death was considered a grave mistake that caused public outrage and loss of trust in law enforcement agencies. Despite his radical, anti-government beliefs, Randy Weaver was still a man of family. The Ruby Ridge tragedy that claimed his wife and son left him scarred for life, and after prison he lived quietly, raising his children until his death in 2022. Fourth, and the next photos is connected to the mysterious disappearance of Jennifer Kesse in Orlando, Florida. In 2006, Jennifer was only 24 years old, had a high-paying job in finance, and had bought her own condo. The area where she lived had many construction sites, and Jennifer often felt uncomfortable because construction workers would stare at her whenever she walked by. One day, while sitting in a bar, Jennifer struck up a conversation with a man named Rob. Because they got along so well, the two quickly became a couple. From then on, Jennifer and Rob would always text each other extensively every morning. On the evening of January 23, 2006, Jennifer and Rob still texted each other a lot before wishing each other good night. But the next morning, something unusual happened. Rob didn't receive any texts from Jennifer. At first, he thought she was busy, but throughout that entire day, he still couldn't contact Jennifer. At the same time, Jennifer's parents also called Rob because they couldn't reach their daughter. Worried, Rob and the family immediately went to Jennifer's condo. When they opened the door with the spare key, they didn't see her anywhere. Personal belongings were still intact, with no signs of break-in. Police were called, but they also discovered nothing unusual in the condo, except for a photograph taken of Jennifer's bathroom on the day she disappeared. A few days later, a nearby resident reported to police about a strange car parked in the neighborhood. When they checked, police confirmed it was Jennifer's car. Security cameras in the area captured images of a man getting out of the vehicle. His direction of movement showed that he was the one who had left Jennifer's car there. However, the suspect's face was obscured in all the frames, making identification impossible. From the limited data, police could only theorize. That morning, Jennifer left her condo to go to work and may have been approached by a man right in the parking garage. He might have asked for a ride or forced her, then made Jennifer drive to another location before abandoning the vehicle. The man appearing in the camera became the only suspect. But because there were no clear images and no direct evidence, the case reached a dead end. To this day, Jennifer Kesse is still listed as missing, leaving no other traces behind. Fifth, This photograph relates to a shocking case in Aurora, Colorado. In 2013, the main character is Isabella Guzman, who was only 18 years old at the time. The relationship between Isabella and her biological mother, Yoon Mi-hoy, had long been very tense. Stepfather Ryan Hoy had witnessed many fierce arguments in the family on multiple occasions. Isabella would react violently whenever her mother tried to talk to her, and this simmering hatred grew over time. On August 28, 2013, Ryan suddenly heard screaming from upstairs. He ran up and found the bathroom door locked. When he broke down the door, he saw a horrible scene, his wife lying on the floor, covered in blood, while Isabella was holding a knife. Before he could react, Isabella fled the house, taking her belongings. Yoon Mi-hoy's body was later determined to have 79 stab wounds. While police urgently searched for her, Isabella had stopped at a grocery store to change her blood-stained clothes and left them in the restroom. The next evening, in a parking lot, police found her hiding under a staircase. Isabella was brought to the station for questioning. In the interrogation room, when police asked her name, she insisted she was Samantha and claimed she had been arrested by mistake. Even when confronted with photographs, Isabella continued to deny her identity. When police mentioned her mother's death, she remained calm and denied any involvement, even challenging police to conduct DNA tests to prove it. This cold attitude initially made police think she was deliberately covering up, but subsequent investigation revealed that Isabella had a history of schizophrenia. This disorder caused her to frequently have hallucinations and believe that she was not the one who committed the crime. The hatred toward her mother, combined with her increasingly severe mental condition, ultimately led to this tragedy. Isabella was not sentenced to ordinary prison, but was placed in a mental health facility until her condition stabilized.